Number 10. Molly Brown House. Molly Brown was known for being an explorer and adventurer, and her adventure led her to end up as a passenger on the Titanic. She was one of only a small number who managed to escape the tragedy alive, getting away on lifeboat number 6. She was known as the heroine of the Titanic, as she tried to get their lifeboat to turn back and find more survivors, and even got the first-class passengers to donate money to the less fortunate who had lost everything in the event. She then returned to her home in Denver, where she lived for years until she finally passed away in 1932. Brown and her separated husband and mother apparently still remain in the home, haunting it to this day. Visitors say that they can often see the figures of the three in various different rooms throughout the house. Furniture will be moved and rearranged, and this most commonly occurs in the room that used to be their daughter's. The house now serves as a museum, and if you're interested, you can visit it to this day. Number 9. Woodburn Mansion. The Woodburn Mansion is located in Dover, Delaware, and was built back in 1790. It is often known for its purchasing in 1965 to be the residence of the governor, but others know it for its history of ghostly appearances. The first ghost was sighted in the home around 25 years after it was built. The two owners at the time were entertaining a preacher, and when they sat down for dinner, he asked if they shouldn't be waiting for the other guests before they start their meal, but the owners explained that there was no other guest. But the preacher described a man he had seen in the home that matched the exact description of one of the owner's fathers. The ghost of her father had also been seen by other guests over the years. People now say that the ghost of a little girl will also often appear, and if you leave out a glass of wine, it will be drank by the spirits of Revolutionary soldiers. Number 8. Bell Witch Farm. The Bell Witch is known for being one of the most well-documented supernatural stories ever. A woman named Kate Batts was neighbors with John Bell, who lived on the Bell Farm. They were feuding neighbors because she believed that he had cheated her out of some land in a deal, and on her deathbed she vowed to haunt the Bell family and farm forever. For the next 3 years, they experienced very strange things happening. They would hear voices speaking into their ears, see strange animals like a dog with a rabbit's head, and John's daughter would even suffer from physical attacks that would leave her unconscious. Eventually, John died, and a vial with a strange liquid was found beside his bed. The Bell Witch was held responsible for his death, marking the first time in history that a death would ever be officially recognized as being caused by the supernatural. Through their website, you can book overnight tours of the property, and for some reason also book some river tubing while you're at it.
Like we're in a Resident Evil game, and head over to a haunted mansion. Here's a good question for all of you in the comments. Would you spend a night in a haunted mansion if that meant you could keep it? I think that would be a hard no for me, because what am I going to do with a haunted mansion after I own it? I don't want to stay in it, and I definitely don't think anyone is going to buy it. Well, La Perle House is one of the most famous haunted mansions in the world, and it got its ghostly reputation for a good reason. During the Pacific War, the Japanese soldiers came through and needed a place to house some of their troops. They started to take any large building and use it as a garrison, and the La Perle House was one of the most infamous, because when another country's troops come through and then you house them, they would be really grateful for you doing such a thing, and they would treat the residents with respect. No, that doesn't happen at all. The La Perle House was a site of a ton of horrible tortures. It said that the wailing of someone being tortured to death can still be heard from the ghosts that walk the halls, and there has also been several executions that took place at this mansion. So if you want to see the head of a ghost rolling down some stairs, this would be the best place to find it. Coming in number 9, we have Clark Air Base Hospital, Pampanga. Let's jump from one war story right into another. This air base hospital was mostly used by American soldiers during the Second World War. As you can imagine, it wasn't a very jolly place to go visit back then. Most of the people who were taken to this hospital were either injured in combat or suffering from some terrible sickness that occurred while they were in the Filipino jungles. That's the problem with waging war on unfamiliar grounds. You can get attacked by things you never expected. There's a lot of troops who died in agony in this hospital, and as you can imagine, a death in suffering brings with it a lot of ghosts. Shadow figures have been seen walking through the halls, and it's very normal to hear the sounds of someone weeping when no one else is around. Coming in number 8, we have Malinta Tunnel, Corregidor. I'm giving you back-to-back hospitals on this one. Why? Because they're a hot spot for ghosts, you silly goose. And just so we're clear, this was a tunnel that was turned into a hospital. Well, not so much a hospital, but a sick bay for injured American troops, and as you can imagine, there has been a lot of people who have died there. The area is now famous for ghostly figures walking around at night. They probably don't even know that they're dead, so it's safe to say that this tunnel isn't somewhere you want to get stuck after the sun goes down. Coming in at number 7, we have Manila City Hall. You know your country has some good spooky stuff when the city hall is infested with ghosts. That's cool as hell. Well, apparently this place is packed with ghosts and they show up like clockwork. As soon as the sun starts going down, spooky stuff will start to pop up all over the building. You get all the standard ghost stuff going on here. People say there's footsteps coming from floors that have no people on them. You can hear whispering coming out of thin air. There's even reports of doors bursting open randomly. I mean, if you're going to be a ghost, you could at least be polite and not slam any of the doors. Thank you very much. Coming in at number 6, we have Mount Maja Az. This island is haunted by a ton of stuff that is outside the world of ghosts, but is still very supernatural. Apparently this place has everything mystical going on over there. There have been reports of dwarves and elves on the island that are apparently really nice. If you come to the island with good intentions, then they will bless you with good luck. But if you come over there with some bad vibes, they will send you a ton of bad mojo that will ruin your whole life. Now there is something over there that is pretty creepy and would keep me away from this island, even though they're supposed to be good luck giving dwarves. Apparently this place is also home to some vampires that roam the island looking for new victims to suck the life out of. Yeah, that doesn't sound like a hot vacation spot for me. Coming in number 5, we have Baja Nepula San Ildefonso Bulacan. This is another place that the Japanese used as a garrison while they were waging war. And I don't know if you know this about the Japanese, but even though they seem cute and cuddly now, they weren't always like that. The Japanese used to be brutal. They would try to completely eradicate other cultures, and they saw themselves as the superior Asian race. All others were disposable, and the way they treated the Filipino people was horrible. At Baja Nepula, many people were beaten, tortured, and even the place has such a horrible history that the building has been abandoned ever since, and no one will go close to it. It's said that it has a horrible curse on it. Coming in at number 4, we have Herrera Mansion, Quezon. Now we're moving to a place that has a couple of famous ghosts. It's one thing to have a haunted attraction that has some voices and screams coming out of it, or has stories of people feeling cold spots, but actually seeing the same ghost over and over, that's something you can sell tickets to. Apparently there is a ghost of a Japanese soldier that will wander the property. He sometimes yells out or vanishes and then reappears in an instant. I mean, that's kind of spooky, but I've got a little added bonus that will make the whole thing a lot spookier. The ghost is headless. Yeah, that's exactly what you need to give this place a little extra spooky vibe. Now, even though our headless soldier is the star of the show, there's another set of ghosts that have been seen quite often. There's a ghost couple that has been seen walking around hand in hand around the building. It's thought that they could be the original owners of the building. Coming in at number 3, we have Balete Drive, one of the most famous kinds of hauntings you can have, the Lady in White. There's a house on Balete Drive that is apparently home to a lady in white. She loves to watch people as they walk by and apparently doesn't like men very much. This could be because it's suspected that she was killed by Japanese soldiers. If you're a man driving by the Lady in White's home, she might use her supernatural powers to teleport into your back seat, and when you look into your rear view mirror, you will see her staring back at you with her body drenched in blood. Hopefully she doesn't leave a blood stain on the new leather. Coming in number 2, we have Diplomat Hotel by Guyo. It's safe to say that the events that took place at the Diplomat Hotel were not very diplomatic. I would describe them as horrific and unnecessary, but that's just me. This hotel was a hotspot for executions. This is a place where many nuns and priests were rounded up in an attempt to destroy Catholicism in the Philippines. These nuns and priests were executed in front of everyone, and their heads were then kicked down the steps. Major disrespect on so many levels. Well, when you cut off the heads of that many people, then you're going to anger some ghosts. There's a ton of spirits that call this place home, and many of them are headless. There's so many headless ghosts at this place they don't even have one superstar. They all work together as one major attraction. Coming in at the number 1 spot, we have Ilolio. Let's step away from ghosts for a little while and check out something else supernatural that is haunting the island of Ilolio. Turns out there is something way scarier than a vampire in the Philippines. If you thought that the headless ghosts were bad, then this thing is going to make you wish you were surrounded by them. This area in the Philippines is a apparently home to the Tick-Tick. It patrols the land and should be something that you try to avoid at all costs. The Tick-Tick is described as a large bird or a bat and will stalk people as they walk in the dark and sneak up on them and then use its long tongue to start drinking their blood. But that's where its terrifying traits just start. Apparently this creature likes the taste of unborn children. It will find a woman who's pregnant and wait for her to go to sleep. Then it will use its long tongue to pierce the woman's stomach, but do it in such a way where she doesn't wake up. And while she is asleep, the Tick-Tick will eat her baby. That sounds horrific.
Starting off at number 10 is the SS Andrea Doria, also known as the Mount Everest of scuba diving, so you bet your ass I was going to start with this one. So the Doria was an Italian ocean liner which had the capacity of holding around 1,200 passengers and 500 crewmen. Italy was trying to rebuild their reputation after World War II, so the Doria was an icon of national pride. It was their biggest, fastest and safest vessel at the time, and it went on its maiden voyage in January of 1953. In July of 1956, its final voyage took place, and it was such a 1 in a million chance it sank the way it did. It went from place to place and was finally making its way from Naples to New York, but at that time the MS Stockholm was making its way from New York to Sweden. The Doria had been traveling in heavy fog for hours now, so they were going slow, they had their precautionary measures in place, it was all going well. When the MS Stockholm entered the fog, they sort of had no idea what was happening, nor could they see any ship in the fog. Now they knew they were both there because of the radar, but they miscommunicated each other's courses and started steering towards each other. They collided horribly and the ship sank 180 feet below the water. Thankfully, all the survivors were saved and only 46 died in the crash itself. Now divers that go down there have seen odd movements from the corner of their eye inside the shipwreck when there aren't any fish around. They felt the sensation of being touched on the shoulder and being pulled a certain direction despite no sudden current change. And I mean, not to mention, because it's so deep, so many divers died just trying to even reach the vessel. Coming in at number 9 is the SS Muigan, and it's Irish, so I hope I said that right. Shout out to Jack Finch. So this vessel only survived till her second voyage before sinking off the coast of the Lizard Peninsula near Cornwall. It was October 1898 and the ship was making its way from London to New York when it suspiciously veered wildly off course and went towards the Cornish coastline. It crashed into the highly dangerous rocks of the Manacles, killing 106 people in the process. But the most sus part of it all was that one rescuer on the job claimed he saw a mystery man leaving the ship on a lifeboat and making his way inland, and that mystery person turned out to be the captain of the ship. Biggest snake of 1898 confirmed. It was speculated that there was just no way such an experienced captain would veer that much off course and crash on rocks that were nowhere near his planned route. Apparently he had purposefully sunk the vessel for insurance gain, and if that's true, I hope killing 106 people was worth it, you effing snake. Divers that go explore the spooky relic have reported feeling a very weird sensation when touching the steamer, almost like an electric shock or current going through their system. One group of divers even said they were guided by something or some presence or something to a skeleton that was hidden inside the ship. At number 8 we have the RMS Roan. Now this one is royally screwed. It was a UK Royal Mail ship before it sank, and it's now one of the most popular Caribbean wreck dive sites that people explore. On the day it sank, the San Narciso hurricane hit, so the master of the ship decided to move everyone off his ship called the Conway, which was to stay at the harbour, and onto the Roan, which was to go into the open water. As the Roan was going, the tail end of the storm hit them. The passengers were tied to their bunks to prevent injuries, which became problematic later on, as you can imagine. Captain Woolley was thrown straight overboard and never seen again. The anchor was cut off and still remains wrapped around the same coral head a century and a half later. 145 people were aboard and only 25 survived. Despite a horrible sinkage, the dive site is actually quite safe and roomy and kind of pretty. Like, the hull is filled with marine life and coral, so it's not super creepy. However, divers who have gone down there have heard screams underwater, I'm assuming from the people that were tied up and unable to escape as the ship was sinking right under them. Anxiety? Divers also feel like they're being touched by things that aren't there, and I mean, you can attribute that to water currents and whatnot, whatnot, but if you're hearing screams, ghosts are definitely around, my friend.
Number 7. The Mackenzie House. The Mackenzie House is located in Toronto and is known for being the home of the city's first ever mayor, William Mackenzie. He moved to the home in 1859 and died only 2 years later, leaving behind his wife and a total of 14 children. The home was empty for a while until renovations began in the 1940s to turn the property into a museum. That was when people started reporting the ghost of the Mackenzie house. It was apparently a long-haired woman who even reportedly slapped a caretaker across the face. There were also many more reports of the ghost of William Mackenzie himself haunting the house, being spotted many different times over the decades. Other reports include a tall, dark figure that watches guests sleep, footsteps creaking through the hall, and the sound of piano music. The house was successfully turned into a museum and is open for anybody to visit. Number 6. Lalaurie House. The Lalaurie House was famously reimagined in American Horror Story Coven, Kathy Bates playing Madame Delphine Lalaurie. The woman was a real-life socialite turned serial killer. She had a chamber in her home where she would dispose of her victims between 1831 and 1834, but responders to a fire would eventually uncover her dark secret. Her victims apparently continue to haunt the property to this day, unable to rest because of how they died tragically. Pedestrians can apparently hear shouting, moaning, and crying coming from the home, some people even saying that they can see faces looking out into the street from the windows. Despite its history, the house has managed to maintain a place on the market, even being owned by Nicolas Cage until 2009, and it's now apparently owned by a wealthy oil tycoon. Number 5. Franklin Castle. Franklin Castle is known as one of the most haunted destinations in Ohio, having been built in 1865 for the Tiedemann family. Over the next few years, various different tragedies would take place. 4 of the family members died, and the father apparently had a hidden passage inside the home where he killed another member of his family and his mistress. Since then, those who have been inside the castle cite various different paranormal experiences and strange occurrences. In the tower window, there is apparently a woman in black who will stand there looking out at passersby. There are also reports of crying children, doors flying off hinges, and lights spinning. You can also apparently hear footsteps inside the home even if you're alone, and if you leave something on a floor or a table, it will be moved to a different spot. Human remains were also once found inside the home in the 1970s, though it was never confirmed whether or not they were real. Number 4. Joshua Ward House. The Joshua Ward House was built in Salem in 1784, Salem being known as one of the most haunted cities in the world due to the witch trials that took place there. The home was built by Joshua Ward on property that was first owned by George Corwin, the High Sheriff of Salem during the trials. He was responsible for all of the deaths that came as a result, and there were even rumors that he would lure those accused of being witches to his home and would inflict cruelty on them before their trial. Many times after a witch was found guilty, George would go to their home and steal their belongings, an action that would eventually end up with him being arrested. After he died, he was buried in the basement of the home, and as a result apparently haunts it to this day. People report the feeling of being choked, apparently by George's spirit, and there are 2 others that haunt the home: Giles Corey, a man who was found guilty as being a warlock, and another unnamed witch.
Filling our number 7 slot are Fujikawa Maru and Hoki Maru, because the only thing better than one haunted shipwreck is 2. These 2 ships were part of a 60 vessel unit that was basically Japan's stronghold in that part of the Pacific Ocean. They were sunk by US forces in 1944 during World War II, and now both wrecks are at the bottom of Truk Galoon. There's just something really eerie about what water damage and decay looks like, and I feel like everything is just a lot creepier underwater anyway. But either way, divers that have the balls to go down there and explore the wreck have 2 things to worry about: sharks and the fact there's still life on the shipwrecks. Which one is scarier? You tell me. I vote number 1. Now divers have reported hearing the sound of machinery working away, and when the show Destination Truth was down there filming the wreckages, they picked up recordings of engines turning over and working when, hello, that is not possible. Now at number 6 is the USAT Liberty. So this vessel was a US Army cargo ship that got torpedoed by a Japanese submarine back in Jan of 1942 and obviously did not survive. It was towed and beached somewhere along the coast of Bali, and it stayed there until the eruption of Mount Agung in 1963. The eruption pushed the Liberty back out to sea, where it lays on a sand slope 100 feet underwater. Divers that go there have never reported seeing people down there or hearing sounds, but most of them have seen a rapidly approaching object that looks like it's coming at you and then it just disappears. Many believe it's the apparition of the torpedo that caused the vessel's downfall way back when. And this is cool to me since I never really hear about people seeing the ghosts of inanimate objects. Like people and animals, yes, but a torpedo? That's the first for me. Coming in at number 5 is the SS Kamloops. So this one was actually a Canadian lake freighter that went on its first trip in 1924. In late November of 1927, it was carrying a bunch of cargo like paper-making machinery, shoes, piping, tar paper, etc. And it was going through Lake Superior, and sadly, in that period, storms were horrific. If you live in Canada, then I don't even need to tell you how bad the winter is, and in water, it's even worse. Now, covered in ice, the Kamloops was last seen going towards the shore of Isle Royale on December 6th. Search parties for the ship started a week after, but to no avail. The 22 people aboard were never seen again. Someone even found a message in a bottle a year later from Alice Bettridge, and she initially survived the sinking, and the note said, "I am the last one left alive. Freezing and starving to death on Isle Royale in Lake Superior. I just want mom and dad to know my fate." How haunting is that? Like, imagine being Alice, trying not to die, trying not to freeze, all alone just hoping for someone, like anyone. Now the vessel wasn't located till 1977 when it was discovered 270 feet below water near Isle Royale. The whole thing was intact because of the ice-cold water, and there's even a conserved body of a sailor inside the wreckage till this day. Locals call him Whitey or Grandpa, and when divers go down there, they feel this happy aura around his body that they can't explain. Grandpa also has the habit of moving around on his own despite being jammed under debris. Some divers have claimed he's under a ladder, others say he's under a door. How does he randomly move under debris? Like, the water can't move him like that. How does he do that? Grandpa, tell me your secrets. At number 4 is the Ethel shipwreck, and if you guys haven't heard of the YouTube channel Amy's Crypt, definitely check it out. She investigated the shipwreck at night, and I was genuinely just shitting myself watching it. And if you guys like scary things, there you go. Now on the 2nd of January 1904, the Ethel was on its way from South Africa when it hit a reef off the coast of South Australia. The wreck was not as big of a tragedy as you'd think. When it struck the reef, a young 19-year-old boy volunteered to swim to shore with a lifeline, but he was swept away and killed ASAP Rocky. Thankfully, by the next morning, the Ethel drifted to shore and everyone was safe. Suspiciously enough, the vessel that reported the Ethel's wreckage was called the Ferret, and that ship went down the same way in the exact location the Ethel did, but just 16 years later. Now there are 26 shipwrecks along the coast, and it looks like a ship graveyard because it is. There's just a bunch of ship skeletons, and yes, they actually look like skeletons, so I was like, wow. Amy went to the wreckage at night and used a device that transforms frequencies we can't hear into ones we can. She asked if there was someone around them that was aboard the Ethel, and a clear hymn was heard on the device. Members of her crew felt like they were being touched by the spirits around them, and I honestly wouldn't be surprised judging by how many ships died there. Filling our number 3 slot is the Salem Express. Now this was originally a French passenger ship that sank in the Red Sea. It was basically a roll-on, roll-off car and person ferry that operated between Egypt and Saudi Arabia. Now on the 17th of December 1991, the vessel was on its way back from carrying hundreds of Egyptian pilgrims when it hit the Hyndman Reefs. Now the ship was hit really badly. Its boat completely blew open and it was underwater within minutes. Around 470 people died, which was controversial since around 700 people were aboard the ship, and if that was the case, where did the rest of these people go? Like, where they at though? Now teams went to the wreckage to recover the bodies under there, but had to eventually stop since it was getting too dangerous to go into the wreckage since its openings were sealed with plates, and if you get stuck under there, you're screwed. Now the thing is like a frozen relic in time. There are still cars down there, luggage, TVs, children's toys and clothes. It's just eerie. It's located under 30 meters of water, and divers that have gone there have reported hearing children laughing and the sounds of car engines revving. Some have even claimed claim they've seen the tires of the cars move even though they've been jammed and rusted for decades. Now at number 2 is the St. Peter. Now this schooner was delivering a shipment of coal from New York to Ohio back in October of 1898. I feel like 1898 was a bad year for ships and stuff. Like I feel like I've seen that year pop up a lot in this video, so I'm like, not a good year for anyone. Either way, the St. Peter encountered a horrible storm on Lake Ontario, which again happened previously on this list as well. You can't underestimate Canadian winter, you guys. What are you doing? Big mistake. Anyway, the storm destroyed the vessel and the crew actually survived for 12 hours after the wreck during 70-mile-per-hour winds and 20-foot waves. They're the real MVPs right there. My heart goes out to the unimaginable things they had to go through in those 12 hours. By the end of it, when rescues finally got there was only one survivor, and that was the boat's captain, who was clinging to the boat's mast. Apparently his wife Martha was clinging onto it too, but drowned mere minutes before her husband was rescued. It's said her spirit haunts the wreckage and divers like to go around the October period because it's said Martha's ghost is most likely to be seen around her death anniversary. No matter what time of the year divers go though, they always experience horrible conditions around the area of the boat. Said to be, I guess, the weather haunting the area, just like it did when it sank? Who knows? And finally, at number 1 is the SS Emperor. Always gotta save the best for last, you guys. Now the SS Emperor was a Canadian freighter that sank off the shore of Isle Royale in Lake Superior back in 1947. The Great Lakes are honestly just taking down everyone, like no mercy, and no one is safe. Hide your kids, hide your wife. Now on the 3rd of June 1947, the vessel left Thunder Bay with nearly 10.5 tons of iron ore. By midnight, the captain gave the ship to the first mate, who was extremely fatigued. That caused him to not realize the ship was going the wrong way, and by 4 AM the freighter crashed on Canoe Rocks near Isle Royale. The whole thing literally sank within 30 minutes and 12 crewmen died, including the first mate and captain. Rescuers got there quickly and rescued everyone else aboard, but bodies were missing and have still yet to be found. The wreckage nowadays has a very sinister reputation. Apparently divers have seen the dead crew still working away at the ship with its ruined equipment. Instead of having eyes, they have dark pools of nothing and have been heard whispering the word die repeatedly. Nah, B? Nah. And that's it for today's video, guys. I don't know who in their right mind would want to go and explore a haunted shipwreck God knows how many feet underwater. I'm not trying to be that deep underwater, I'm not trying to get drowned by some salty spirit who died in one of the Great Lakes, and I'm certainly not trying to get eaten by sharks. Nah, B?
Number 3, the Myrtles Plantation. The Myrtles Plantation in St. Francisville is said to be one of the creepiest places in the South and is even called one of the most haunted houses in America. The house was built in 1797, and since then apparently dozens of deaths have occurred in a variety of different ways, including illness, poisoning, and attacks. Visitors and those who have lived in the home have reported many strange events taking place within the house. A few of the reported paranormal events include jewelry disappearing, furniture moving on its own, a grand piano playing itself, mysterious handprints, disappearing objects, and seeing former house residents standing behind you in mirrors. In the 70s, when it was purchased by the Myers family, there were numerous reports and even photos of the spirit of a young girl haunting the property. Now it stands as a bed and breakfast, popular with those chasing the paranormal, and you can receive tours late at night. Number 2, the Winchester Mystery House. This one is probably the most popular and well known on this list. The Winchester Mystery House was built in San Jose, California, and is said to be haunted by the ghosts of everyone who was killed by a Winchester weapon. Sarah Winchester lived in the home after the death of her husband, the founder, and was tormented by the spirits of everyone who had died. So she started adding rooms to the home to make room for and confuse the restless spirits. Over time, the home became a labyrinth with many confusing features, including halls to nowhere, cut-off staircases, and sloping floors. The house now apparently has 10,000 windows, 2,000 doors, 47 fireplaces, 40 staircases, 13 bathrooms, and 9 kitchens. Sarah Winchester died in 1922, and the home is now host to tours for anyone who wishes to go in search of evidence of the many ghosts within the walls. Number 1, the Whaley House. In the year 1852, a man named James Robinson, also known as Yankee Jim, was sentenced to death for the crime of grand larceny or theft. Years later, a couple named Thomas and Anna Whaley built a house on the exact spot where Yankee Jim had passed away. As a result, the home apparently became haunted by his restless spirit. His footsteps were apparently able to be heard throughout the house. As years went on, though, more ghosts came to inhabit the property, including Mr. and Mrs. Whaley after they had passed away, along with their dog. All their ghosts have been reported as being sighted within the home. The sightings and paranormal events apparently became so overwhelming that in the 1960s, the US Commerce Department classed the house as officially haunted. It is now a museum that offers nighttime tours to those who are interested in potentially catching a glimpse of the ghosts.
At number 10, we have the Peel County Historic Courtroom. We are going to start off this video with a Canadian city. Let's head right over to Brampton, Ontario. This monument is a piece of Canadian history and has been an attraction for Canadian historians who want to get a piece of early 20th century life. The courthouse is closed down now, but during its run, it was a spot for 3 separate hangings. That would have been a wild way to go. You commit a crime, and then the whole town shows up to watch you get hanged? Like, even the kids are there? It's specifically the hanging of Gordon Matthews that catches people's attention. He was hung for murdering his wife, and some people have said that they've seen old Gordy walking through the halls. There have been reports of a weeping man or screams coming from the empty courtroom. Well, that's what you get for killing your wife, dude. Maybe if you were a better person, you would be haunting a movie theater instead, and you get to watch all the movies for free. At number 9, we have the Lincoln Courtroom in Maine, USA. I'm gonna start this one off by showing you a picture of this place. Are you serious? That looks like the spookiest place of all time. If someone was like, you have to spend one night in there and you get $1 million, I would be like, no thanks, I'll go sleep in my basement apartment for the rest of my life, I'm fine with that. This place was built in 1825 and a ton of executions have taken place there. Different attorneys have said that they've seen something that is definitely not human walking up and down the halls. They describe it as a shadow that can move through doors. At number 8, we have the Henry County Courtroom in Louisville, Kentucky. This courtroom is still used to this day, and the history spans back over 150 years, so it's no surprise that this place has picked up some ghosts along the way. There have been a ton of paranormal happenings going on here. People hear doors opening and closing. Sometimes security guards will chase after footsteps and find nobody there, and there have even been voices recorded in the empty courtroom. Most supernatural activity come from the several deaths that have taken place on the property, the most gruesome being a 14-year-old girl who was hanged there. It was way back in the 19th century, so I'm assuming that they thought she was a witch or something. This place has freaked out so many people that a team of paranormal investigators went to see what they could find, and they managed to catch a videotape of an orb floating through the air, which is Ghost Activity 101. At number 7, we have the Grimes County Courtroom in Texas. This is the place where one of the famous members of the Burroughs Gang was sentenced to death, after which he put a curse on the place. Apparently since then there has been a dark energy associated with the location. I never understood how you were allowed to put a curse on a place if you were already the bad guy. The people who are putting you on trial are getting revenge on you because you're a gang member who is terrorizing the town. You don't get to get revenge on revenge. That doesn't make any sense. But even though this courtroom is located in a town that is so small it is technically a village, it was spooky enough to get some paranormal investigators to come through. They confirmed that this place is haunted by some sort of energy, and even one of the judges who works there said that they've seen several strange happenings that she could not explain. At number 6, we have the second courthouse in Niagara Falls. There is so much stuff to check out when you go to Niagara Falls. You could go to the falls, then you could go gambling, and then, I honestly don't know, I've never been there, but I'm sure there's other things to do. But apparently there's also a haunted courtroom. The famous paranormal story about this place is one night a cleaning lady had to stay late. She was cleaning the courtroom, and then one of the light fixtures on the ceiling started to sway back and forth. It kept swinging more and more violently until it eventually flew off the ceiling and smashed on the ground. This scared the poor woman and she ran out. Now, is this a real story or is this just a fun tale to tell tourists so they come and spend their money there? Either way, I'm in. At number 5, we have the Otero County Courtroom in New Mexico. Now we are going over to America, baby. The ghosts in this courtroom have been tormenting people in and outside of the building. One of the maintenance workers there said that they've seen things fly off the tables, doors open and close on their own, and sometimes these doors will slam violently. And surveillance cameras have caught a ghostly figure walking up and down the halls. It's unsure how exactly the spectral spirits are related to this building, but some people think it could be the ghost of a man who committed suicide on the property back in the 1970s. At number 4, we have the Wayne County Courtroom in Ohio. This place has been tormented by the spirit known as the Lady in Pink. More than one employee has said that they've seen the ghostly figure in pink walking throughout the building and up and down the hallways. She has been seen both at night and during the day and was tormenting one of the maintenance workers so often that he quit. There's apparently footage of this Lady in Pink, and I dug all around for it, but I couldn't find it anywhere. So if any of you can find footage of the Wayne County Lady in Pink, please leave it in the comments. At number 3, we have the Desha County Courtroom in Arkansas. This place's ghost is so famous that they actually gave him a name. Willard has been walking around the halls of this place for decades. I wonder if that's his actual name or if that's just a name that somebody gave to him one day. They were like, "Hey, what's up, Willard?" And he's like, "My name's not Willard, it's Alfonso. Stop calling me that." And to top off Willard, there's also a curse on the clock tower located on the courthouse grounds. When a man was set to be hanged after he had burned down a bunch of hotels, he put a curse on the land and the clock tower stopped working. A maintenance worker said that the clock tower doesn't work because it just needs some repairs, but it's pretty interesting that it stopped working just as someone put a curse on it. At number 2, we have the Nueces County Courtroom in Texas. This place has been closed down since 1977, but still stands as a terrifying monument to the people who were killed there and their souls who refused to leave. There were a ton of hangings at the courthouse, and they had an indoor gallows. Could you imagine looking out your cell window and being like, "Well, it's raining today, I guess they can't hang me today," and then the guard's like, "We live in Texas, baby, we hang you indoors, come on, it's sold out." While this place was still open, the kitchen staff would constantly complain about things moving on their own, cold spots, voices, and even burners getting blown out all by themselves. Now if you walk past the building, you can see ghostly faces in the window looking back at you. Some people think that they are spirits who so badly want to be freed from the prison, and other people think they are a warning telling you not to go in. At number 1, we have the Frontenac County Courtroom in Kingston, Ontario. This place used to be the most popular spot in town to go watch a man get hung, and I'm not exaggerating. There would be days there'd be so many people who showed up that they would have to bring out benches for extra seating. If I was ever hung, I would just want it to be a sold out hanging, like I want to be that popular. After the prisoners met their fate at the gallows, they would be buried right on the courthouse grounds. So it's no surprise that a few spirits decided to pop up. When the courthouse was updated and they went to put in a fancy new parking lot, they wanted to move all the bodies to a real cemetery. But most of the hangings took place in the 1800s, so the documents were a little sparse, so they couldn't find all the bodies. Now ghostly figures have been seen all around the courtroom and the courthouse, the most popular being an old man with a noose around his neck.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the Fairmont Banff Spring Hotel. This Canadian hotel is absolutely legendary, but despite the spooky tales, tourism remains as high as ever. This hotel was built in 1888 in order to encourage tourists and to sell train tickets, and while it certainly did just that, this chateau-style hotel was only the icing on the cake to a trip to the gorgeous Rocky Mountains and all that waits in the Banff National Park. Through the years, though, several guests have had some haunting stories to tell, which included reports of ghost sightings. These ghosts are thought to reside in the hotel, and they include a bride who allegedly fell down the stone staircase during her wedding, which led to her untimely departure, or the legend of Sam the Bellman. This legend has it that Sam worked at the hotel until 1975, and before leaving, he claimed that he would come back to haunt the hotel. It is said that his spirit can be seen in the hotel, helping people with their bags. In our number 9 spot today, we have Zunantunich. This location sits deep in the jungles of Belize, located less than a mile from the border of Guatemala. It has an unbelievably rich history, as it is an ancient Maya ruin that has been abandoned for the last 1,000 years. In 1890, this site had its modern discovery, and since then it has been an important site for archaeology, an amazing tourist attraction, but also it is said to be a hotspot for the paranormal. It is said that the site is haunted by a female ghost. She has black hair and glowing red eyes. Referred to as the Stone Lady, it is said that she was first spotted by one of the first research teams in the area in 1893, and since then she has been frequently seen by the tallest building complex called El Castillo. No one exactly knows the story behind the Stone Lady considering the history of this site, but many believe she may have been a part of a ritual sacrifice, which was a tradition and spiritual spiritual practice done by the ancient Maya civilization. In our number 8 spot today, we have Burg Eltz. This German castle dates back to 1157, so it's no surprise that there are many myths and legends surrounding it. The most common tale is that of a young countess named Agnes. Agnes was betrothed or promised to another noble, but after meeting him, she called off their future wedding. Apparently, this guy was the worst, and also, even if he wasn't, no one could really blame her for calling off a wedding she didn't want to have. But of course, things quickly went awry. This noble guy was mad that she had rejected him, so the scorned lover laid siege to the castle. Agnes fought to defend her home, but she passed away during the battle. That is the story behind why her spirit is said to haunt the Burg Eltz castle. Many say the strongest presence is felt in her former bedroom. It is said that her spirit is quite mournful, and apparently her battle armor and axe remain on display as well. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Eden Brown Estate. This estate is located in Nevis, which is the smaller of the 2 islands that comprise the nation of St. Kitts and Nevis in the Caribbean. It is said that despite having just as much to offer, Nevis is often overshadowed by St. Kitts. That is, until people hear of this ghostly haunting. Eden Brown Estate is a former plantation that now lies in ruin. The estate was once owned by a businessman who was going to give the property to his daughter as a wedding present. Legend goes that on the wedding day there was a very mysterious duel between the groom and his best man that ended up leaving both of the men dead. Because of this tragic happening on what should have been her wedding day, the businessman's daughter remained unmarried and alone for the rest of her life, which meant that when she passed, there was no one to leave the estate to. Now visitors of the estate report seeing the spirit of a reclusive woman as she roams about the grounds. Aside from this story, who knows what other kind of horrors and absolute tragedies that this place has seen. In our number 6 spot today, we have Bangar Fort. Bangar Fort is located in India, just 100 miles southwest of Delhi. This place is pretty much completely abandoned, as it is said to have had a curse placed on it. Apparently many years ago, a sorcerer tried to woo a local princess, in which she rejected him. He got so upset that he decided that cursing this town was his only course of action. I just have to mention that none of these are a normal reaction to being rejected, and calling it an overreaction would honestly be an understatement. This fort now is closed to visitors after sundown because of all the spooky happenings that go on here. This fort is extremely beautiful, so it's no wonder the paranormal doesn't keep people out. People have reported having extremely strong feelings of an otherworldly presence, and even some have reported hearing voices that are seemingly coming from nowhere. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Whaley House. The Whaley House is located in San Diego and it was built in 1857. The site that this family house was built on was actually the location of San Diego's first public gallows, so as you can imagine, that's a pretty good backstory for a haunted site. Right after moving in, Thomas Whaley reported that he could hear the footsteps of Yankee Jim Robinson, who had been hanged at the gallows just 4 short years before the house was built. After moving in, the Whaley family began to experience a bunch of family tragedies, many of which actually happened inside of the house. The Whaley house is now a museum, and apparently the family members continue to haunt the site. These paranormal occurrences are apparently often accompanied by the smells of cigar smoke and heavy perfumes. In our number 4 spot today, we have Obvodny Canal. Obvodny Canal is located in St. Petersburg, Russia, and this whole thing just really creeps me out. This man-made canal was built in the late 18th century, and ever since then there has been extremely strange occurrences at this location. Construction workers would complain of headaches. They would also sometimes even have random outbursts of violent behavior that was uncharacteristic of them. But the craziest, most unsettling part is what has given this location full cursed status. Many of these people have attempted to take their own lives. Sadly, most of the attempts were successful, but the few people who have been saved have explained that they have no idea why they did it. They say that they didn't really have intentions beforehand, and some have even said that they felt some sort of invisible force pulling them into the water. Apparently there are some sinister souls that live beneath the surface of the water, and there have even been reports of seeing a lady in white in the water before she suddenly disappears. Long story short, remind me to just never ever go here. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Eastern State Penitentiary. The Eastern State Penitentiary is located in Philadelphia, and of course it used to be a prison, but it is now an abandoned and extremely haunted house. This prison used to house some pretty big profile prisoners such as Al Capone and Willie Sutton, but it was different from the American prisons we are used to now. This is because this prison was entirely separate incarceration. The inmates would live, sleep, eat, and everything else alone. When they were removed from their cells, they would have hoods placed over their heads as well. Considering all we now know about how detrimental isolation is, this of course must have taken an immense toll on the prisoners. Beside this, there were also some pretty gruesome and horrible punishments in this prison, such as having prisoners' tongues chained to their wrists. I'm honestly not even sure how you would do that, but apparently it was a thing. This prison now sees thousands of voluntary visitors every year, and there have been plenty of reports of some creepy paranormal happenings. These reports include seeing shadowy figures, hearing creepy laughter that doesn't belong to anyone living, and hearing footsteps throughout the prison. I feel like considering all that went on when this prison was active, it truly does make sense that this building would be a haunted one. In our number 2 spot today, we have Raynham Hall. Raynham Hall is located in England and was built around 1620, and it is a large building on 7,000 acres, which is obviously quite impressive. The tale that follows this haunted building is that of Lady Dorothy Dolly Townsend and her husband Viscount Turnip Townsend. I can't believe a couple with the nicknames Dolly and Turnip have an evil history, but unfortunately, they do. The story goes that Turnip kept Dolly locked up in the house, which is obviously just terrible and very cruel. After her passing, it's no wonder she decided to stick around and haunt the house. Apparently, there was a photo taken of her ghost in 1930, and it is said that no one has ever been able to prove it was a fake, so all you photo experts out there, take a look and let me know what you think. A lot of the places on this list now serve as haunted houses, but apparently this one is still lived in by the Raynham family. Hence the name. In our number 1 spot today, we have Forsyth Park. One thing I didn't know is that apparently the entire city of Savannah, Georgia is a pretty haunted place due to the creepy tunnels that are located underneath the city. But one of the most notable, highly haunted places within the city is Forsyth Park. Apparently there used to be a hospital across the street, and there would be autopsies performed in the tunnels below the park. I personally feel like autopsies are already creepy enough, so I'm not sure if conducting them in an underground tunnel was exceptionally necessary, but hey, I can't change the past. Because of this scary practice, the park has seen a lot of paranormal activity since these days, and it usually is the sort of place where 1 second you'll see a strange figure, but as soon as you blink or look away, it disappears just as quickly as it suddenly appeared.
So starting us off in at number 10, we have Villisca Axe Murderer House in Villisca, Iowa, easily the most notable murders out of Iowa. This story has haunted the town of Villisca since 1912. On June 10th of that year, the new house got a new nickname, the Axe Murder House, after a gruesome murder took place. Josiah B. Moore and his wife, along with their 4 young children and 2 guests of the family, were bludgeoned to death with, you guys guessed it, an axe. Well, what's more, they never identified who did it to them. The authorities investigated for 10 years and had famous grand jury trials over what would be called today as, well, famously said by Donald Trump, is fake news. Slander lawsuits took place and many political careers were broken because of it all.
Information that was false and fake and never happened got released to the public.
As the story goes, the family had a normal day leading up to the evening with their kids at a Sunday school program and their 2 neighbors joining and spending the night. The axe used was already on the Moore property and is the ominous weapon used against the 8 victims. But the strangest thing about this eerie tale is that the axe was found next to a pond of bacon, and all of the windows and mirrors were covered up with clothes and piece of wood from furniture. There was blood everywhere, and there was a plate of uneaten food. Is this real life right now? I have no idea what is going on. The mysterious killer must have had to go on to the next family, because from 1911 to 1912 there was a slew of other eerily similar axe murderers in Iowa. There is said to be as many as 24 similar murders cases that were never solved. Number 9, the Winchester Mystery House, San Jose, California. This is the story of Sarah Lockwood Winchester and the mystery behind her choice to do construction on the house every single day from when she moved in. Her late husband, William Wirt Winchester, is the man responsible for the Winchester rifle, a historically famous gun that is said to have, won the West. Well, they had a baby girl who died 6 weeks after birth, and her husband passed away shortly after that from tuberculosis. Legends have it that Sarah had spoken to a fortune teller of sorts who told her to leave her home in Connecticut and move west. She chose San Jose, but it gets even more strange. This medium had told her that the bad fortune that her family had was because of the men that were killed at the hands of the famous Winchester rifle, and that she needed to build a house big enough for all of them if she wanted to remain alive. Well, this house is a whopping 24,000 square feet. I can't imagine how many bathrooms are in that place. The house was under 24/7, 365 construction for 38 years. Absolutely insane. She really wanted to take the advice seriously. You can just imagine how insane that would be. Just to give you guys a hint, there are 10,000 windows, 47 stairways, and 6 kitchens, because why not? You never know what room you're in where you're gonna get hungry. Alright, moving right along on this list, at number 8 we have the Sultan's Palace, New Orleans, the house at 1716 Dauphine Street, which is a classic French Quarter palace. In 1836, it was said to be leased by the Turkish Sultan when the owner was in a bind, but they needed money but they didn't want to sell it. For months, parties took place that were said to have uniformed men and beautiful women in. Well, concern from the neighbors came when it obviously turned it into an opium den and could hear screams over the loud music that was constantly playing. No one knew what truly went on in that house unless they went in themselves. But the great mystery of the house was the Sultan's demise. One morning, a passerby noticed that there was blood dripping from the windows and front steps of the palace. Police arrived on the scene only to find men and women and children scattered around the property, dismembered. Their body parts was virtually everywhere. Is this real life right now? They found one man buried in the courtyard who initially assumed to be the Sultan, but it was in fact his brother. Coming in hot at number 7 of this list, we have a Moundsville Penitentiary, West Virginia. Well, you might recognize this old prison if you were to see it. MTV's Fear Show made it famous again. The decommissioned prison had thought to be haunted before it was shut down and reopened again for tours. Aside from MTV, there have been a ton of ghost hunters, documentary filmmakers. I mean, why not? This place is creepy, it's haunted. I mean, probably Sam and Dean Winchester, they're probably gonna go there as well. Ed and Lorraine Warren, they probably had to holy water a lot of beings, a lot of creatures and demons. Well, this prison holds up to 2,000 prisoners. They executed almost 100 prisoners who is said to have haunted the prison to this day, and nearly 1,000 dead in total. The building was decommissioned in 1995 and now only exists for public tours. Fun fact, actually, Charles Manson once petitioned to be transferred to this location. I'm not sure why. I mean, this guy's crazy.
You don't understand me. That's your trouble.
Number 6, we're bringing you St. Augustine Lighthouse, St. Augustine in Florida. Well, some say this is the most haunted lighthouse in America. It's also the oldest. It might be one of the most haunted ones in the world. Many people lost their lives in or around the lighthouse, and it is believed that their spirits never left the ground. One of the most famous ghost stories from this, pretty airy place is the two petite sisters that can be heard giggling at night. Now, if I'm sleeping in bed and I'm hearing people laughing, I don't think that's too funny. I would be horrified. Their father worked at a lighthouse, and through an unforeseen accident, the two sisters and their friend had fallen off the cliff and drowned. This may not have been no accident. Another tale of the lighthouse keeper's ghost is said to have spent the last 100 years around the property after falling to his sudden death. Some even say he doesn't even know he's dead, and he's just been seen walking around smoking a cigar. Number 5, we've got the Myrtles Plantation in St. Francisville, Louisiana, built on top of an Indian burial ground back in 1796. I'm not sure why people are building things on like cemeteries. You hear about like all these churches being built on cemeteries, or you're just building things on dead people. Why? Well, this sprawling plantation is said to be haunted by at least 12 different ghosts. It is now being turned into a bed and breakfast. Definitely not a place I want to get up in the morning. I'm not having my coffee on top of a dead person. But let me tell you guys a little bit about Chloe. Well, Chloe is said to be the most vengeful of the ghosts that occupied this property. Well, she was hung from a tree after poisoning her slave's master's wife and 2 children with cake. Chloe sought revenge after her death, and we've even found pictures that have been taken present time with a vision of a little girl in a green dress and a head turban on the property and in the windows as people tour and take pictures of their time there. Another ghost still calls this plantation home. A man was shot by the owner of the house after the Chloe era. I mean, there's a lot of history going on in that place. Our number 4, we have the Bell Witch Cave, Adams, Tennessee. This 320-acre home was purchased by the Bell family back in 1804. John Bell was a farmer and he moved there with his wife and children. But 13 years after they had settled, they started to notice paranormal activity. The legend says that the family started to notice animals roaming the property and sounds of chains being dragged through the house. Over the years, Bell had reported to others that the presence began speaking to him and said her name was Kate, the Bell's witch. This Kate character tormented the family, but specifically John's daughter Betsy, scratching her, pulling her hair, and pinching her. It is believed that she was trying to stop Betsy's engagement, and when Betsy finally broke down, Kate said that she would leave her alone and return in 7 years. And again in 104 years. I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be around, so you can do whatever you want to me. Some people think Kate never left because the entire town continued to experience her wrath. Finally, in at number 3, we have one of the most haunted places in America. We have Drummond, Arizona. It is said to be an entire haunted town. So we're not talking about like a building or a cemetery. We're talking about the whole damn place here. It is specifically known for the Drummond Hotel, which was formerly built and used as a hospital and an insane asylum, because why not? A hospital that has over 9,000 deaths. Originally built in 1927, the hospital had a short lifespan, and it sat vacant for nearly 4 decades before it was turned into the Drummond Grand Hotel in 1996. The haunting started right away and were said to be the ghosts of the tortured asylum patients. Keep an eye or an arrow for Claude Harvey, who was a maintenance man on the property in 1935. His body was found pinned underneath an elevator. Even though the elevator had not crushed him, it appeared though he was murdered and his body was just dumped there. Or maybe he was just left there, he wasn't crushed, and maybe he just died from starvation. Or maybe he saw a spider and freaked out under there. Well, there is at least 5 other ghost sightings that include women and children, and several freak accidents that have happened at this property, including a man confined to a wheelchair falling to his death from a balcony, and in the same haunted room, a man killed himself. And also, make sure you guys don't ask about room 32. Number 2 on this list, we have Stepp Cemetery, Benton, Louisiana. So it's kind of obvious that cemeteries are creepy and should be avoided, well, unless you need to pay your respects. But one little spot in Louisiana, well, it's said to be the former home of a cult that sacrificed animals and had orgies. I mean, I'm not making this stuff up. Our research did not determine if it was in that order. There's many stories about this, specifically in volume 5 of an old Indiana folklore book. But one that stands out is of a baby who passed away, and the mother was so distraught, she dug up a burial site for the infant, and she could still be roaming around the area today, weeping and dressed in black near her daughter's grave. You might think all cemeteries look the same, but when you get to this one, you'll definitely notice that most of the gravestones are cracked or broken, which is a bad omen in itself. Number 1 on this list, we have Moon River Brewery, Savannah, Georgia. The American Institute of Paranormal Psychology, which is obviously why we put this in the number 1 spot. New owners of the brewery noticed that something was up when they purchased it in the 90s. Although it's been uninhabited for decades. Well, we all remember that our first beer and drunken shenanigans can get out of hand, but not bottles flying out of thin air and smashing against a wall kind of sort of hand, you know? So imagine just getting drunk and all of a sudden a beer just goes flying out of nowhere and you're the only one in that room. Well, the building back then served as a hospital and hundreds of people died with yellow fever. Well, these ghosts take up every edge of the brewery with special attention on the 2nd floor, or of course the basement. One woman was pushed down the stairs while the other had a frightening experience in the woman's bathroom.
Starting us off here at number 10 is Black Hag's Cell. Found in a secluded hollow in Limerick County, Ireland, lies a mess of crumbling ruins and the ghost of a satanic nun said to have been buried alive. And if that isn't just the perfect setup for a horror movie. As the legend goes, sometime during the 16th century, the demonic nun would sneak out of her monastery at night to the nearby abbey. It was here she performed her satanic rituals, such as sacrificing animals or placing curses on the locals to please the devil. But one day during a battle between rival houses, the nun was wounded by an arrow and fell unconscious. Believing her to be dead, they buried the nun immediately, but soon farmers started hearing screams coming from her burial plot. At first they brushed it off as nothing, but as the screams continued day in and day out, they rushed to exhume the body, worried they buried her too soon. But they were too late. The nun had died and was left with bloody fingers from trying to scratch her way out. It's said at night her screams can still be heard echoing over the hills, and locals don't dare go near in fear that she will possess anyone who steps foot on the land. Coming in at number 9, Hoia Bashu Forest. Known as the Bermuda Triangle of Transylvania, this forest is the breeding ground of unexplained disappearances as well as countless paranormal phenomena. The forest, in fact, has so many terrifying tales surrounding it that many locals refuse to even enter it. But according to those brave enough to try, they were attacked by something indescribable, followed by hours of vomiting, nausea, migraines, and left covered in scratches, bruises, and even burns. Its most haunting legend is that of the forest girl, who allegedly entered at just 5 years old and disappeared. 5 years later, she emerged from the woods wearing the same dress as the day she went missing, and she had no memories or recollection of going missing or what had happened to her in the last 5 years. Some believe that the forest is possessed by a satanic cult. A tour guide once said to have found a group of 60 people gathered in a clearing looking as if they were trying to open a gateway to another dimension, while others think it could be aliens. In 1968, a military technician released a photo he claimed to be a UFO, which was promptly hidden from the public before he was fired. And I mean, it's not every day someone from the military is confirming a UFO sighting. Well, whether it's haunted by a demon or a spot frequented by aliens, either way, I have no interest in checking it out for myself. Next up at number 8 here is the Snechter House. Once home to the Snechter family in the 1980s, they thought they'd found the perfect spot, as it was a fairly affordable house and close to the hospital where their son was being treated. But it wasn't until after they were all settled that they learned the house had operated as a mortuary for several decades since the 1920s. At first, everything seemed alright, but soon they discovered old equipment from the funeral home in their basement. Now, this raised an eyebrow, but they brushed it off and didn't think much of it. That was until they uncovered that their backyard still contained many of the buried corpses, along with eerie photographs of the corpses hidden away in nooks and crannies. Soon they were being haunted by evil spirits, routinely hearing haunting noises and even seeing full-bodied apparitions. The mother claims that when she was mopping the basement, the water would turn red as if it were blood, or that she would catch objects flying around the room while lights would aggressively flicker. At the time, there were rumors circulating that the former funeral directors were guilty of necrophilia, which led to the house becoming haunted by an evil presence, seeking revenge on all that lived in the house for eternity. Coming in at number 7 is the Ancient Ram Inn. Rumored to be the most haunted building in England, there are no shortage of terrifying entities that haunt these grounds. Supposedly, the inn lies atop 2 ley lines, one of which directly intersects with Stonehenge. And if that wasn't enough cause for concern, it was also built over a 5,000-year-old pagan burial ground. According to witnesses, a witch, a poltergeist, a succubus, and an incubus haunt the property, but many think it is much, much more. Legend has it that there are so many demons haunting the grounds that visitors routinely had to get exorcisms after their visit to the inn. Then, in the 1960s, a man named John Humphreys bought the house and decided to make it his own. He had heard the rumors, but believed they were just that,
rumors. But on his first night, he felt something strange. There was something watching him, something very, very evil. Despite his inclination that a dark entity possessed his house, he continued to live there, often recounting paranormal sightings like strange voices, orbs of light appearing out of thin air, and said that once a force even grabbed him by the arm and dragged him around the living room. Even so, John remained until his dying days. And I mean, you do you, but if it were me, I would have been gone after the first night. Coming in at number 6 is Castle Huska. Located in North Prague, this castle was built back in the 13th century. Now, there are a few things that are strange about this castle. Firstly, many of its windows are fake. They are simply glass panes in front of complete walls. Secondly, it lacks common things. There's no water source, no kitchen, and for years after its initial construction, there were no occupants. Lastly, the castle was built in a remote area. It was not near any trading routes, nor did it possess any kind of strategic value. That is because it was built for one reason and one reason only: to cover a large hole in the ground. Now, you might be asking yourself, what's so bad about that? Well, according to legend, the hole was actually a gateway to hell, and Satan himself was said to appear at this very spot. In an attempt to close off the gateway, the castle was constructed atop the hole, hoping to seal it for eternity. But during World War II, German soldiers settled in and used the castle to conduct experiments of the occult variety, and it's believed that these rituals brought out the evil spirits back into our realm. Today, both Satan and some of the evil soldiers haunt the hallowed halls, and some say if you listen closely, you might just be able to hear the scratching of demons trying to join them. Coming in at number 5, the Rose Hall Great House. According to legend, a woman named Annie Palmer moved to Jamaica in the early 1800s. Annie was young, but she was smart and had one big goal in mind: marry rich. While she may have looked sweet and innocent, Annie was actually a renowned voodoo practitioner and became known as the White Witch by the locals. Anyway, after a short while in Jamaica, she met Mr. John Palmer, the owner of the Rose Hall estate, and wasted no time locking him down. After the wedding, Annie moved into the estate with her husband, but not long after, he mysteriously died. As it turns out, it was not so mysterious after all, as Annie had poisoned her husband, and she continued to repeat this pattern twice more while ruling over the estate. And it wasn't just her husbands that Annie was cruel to. She was notoriously brutal to the slaves on the plantation, never hesitating to any one of them that stepped out of line or dared question her. Then there were her lovers. Annie was rumored to have copious amounts of lovers, many of which were enslaved to her, and incidentally, this would also be her downfall. After one of his family members, one of her enslaved lovers, Taku, snuck into Annie's room and killed her in her sleep. Taku was also a voodoo practitioner, and fearing she would haunt him after death, placed a curse on her grave to keep her entrapped. But it said the ritual was never completed, so the ghost of Annie escapes each night, wreaking havoc on trespassers and terrifying all that see her. Next up at number 4 is the Ostrich Inn. During the 17th century, this inn was owned by a man named John Jarman and his wife. The two welcomed travelers from far and wide, but had a special appetite for wealthy customers. When such folks wandered into their inn, they took very kindly to them, offering them free ale and a special room above the kitchen, adorned with much nicer furnishings than the rest. But, as I'm sure you've guessed, there was a huge catch. You see, the bed in this special room was nailed to the floor, and under the bed was a secret trap door. During the night, while their wealthy visitor was sleeping, the husband and wife would pull a lever in their kitchen, dropping the trap door and shooting the poor traveler into a vat of boiling water. Once they were dead, they would rob the wealthy traveler and then hide their body in the cellar. And they might have gotten away with it too if it weren't for Thomas Cole. Cole was a wealthy clothing maker and was swindled by the couple before in the same way as many before him. But luckily, at the time of the incident, his horse happened to break loose and was wandering the town. Folks recognized the horse and thought that Cole must have fallen off, and so a search party began, eventually discovering him dead in the inn. The couple was arrested and sentenced to be hanged, but prior to their death, they confessed to 60 people in their inn. To this day, many have witnessed their evil spirits haunting the halls, as well as all the souls whose lives were lost. Coming in at number 3 is the Demon House. Once the home of Mr. Cranmer, he claims that he and his family lived in this house of horrors for 18 years before an exorcism in 2006 finally drove the demon away. Cranmer says that over the years he would watch helplessly as blood dripped from his walls and invisible hands assaulted him and his family, fearing each day that it might be his last. But where did this possession begin? Well, Cranmer believed it all started with Dr. James Mahon, a former tenant of the home. Dr. Mahon was an alcoholic who routinely performed illegal operations on women in his basement. But not because he was looking to help these women, no, it was because he had a deal with a demon. Cranmer says the demon who haunts the house is Moloch, a demon who feeds off of sacrifices, and that Moloch had possessed Dr. Mahon in order to feed off his basement operations. Once Dr. Mahon died, there was no one left to please this demon, and so he tortured all the families who moved in after, hoping to be able to scare them into giving him what he wanted. Luckily, Mr. Cranmer was able to rid the house of Moloch, and his family escaped the torture unpossessed. Coming in at number 2, the House of Death. Once the home of actress and poet Jan Bryant Bartell in the 1960s, the house holds a reputation for housing some of the most demonic entities in all of New York City. Within weeks of moving in, Jan knew something was deeply wrong with the house. She would often feel the touch of an icy hand across the back of her neck, or hear footsteps follow her around the empty house. The house always reeked like something was rotting or dying, and her dogs were always barking into nothingness. Then one day, one of her dogs died, as if out of nowhere, so she decided to take matters into her own hands and called on a psychic medium. But this only angered the demons living inside. During the first session, the medium went into an unusual trance, speaking about the hundreds of bodies buried underneath the house. Jan knew it wasn't the medium speaking, and it was then that she learned how many people had been killed or taken their own lives while living here. Then, all of a sudden, the medium's eyes bulged out of her head and she started shouting that she would never leave in a deep demonic voice. The encounter was enough for Jan to leave and never return. A few years later, she published a book about her life in the haunted house, just weeks before she sadly took her own life. Still think it's just a coincidence? Years later, in 1987, a father brutally killed his own daughter in a drug-fueled rage, and many believe that he could have been possessed by the very same demon that Jan ran away from all those years before. And last up for you today in our number 1 spot, the Armstrong Street House. In 1970, a couple named Anne and Roger Brock moved their family into a beautiful 4-bedroom house in Kokomo, Indiana. The family didn't have a ton of money, but they were able to score the house for just $5 grand, which in hindsight could have been a clue. Mere hours after the family moved in, they began to experience strange things. Lights were flickering and noises were appearing, but they brushed it off as nothing. Then one night, one of the daughters, Lana, was awoken by sudden shaking all around her bed. She thought it was an earthquake at first, but then she looked out her window to see a strange man, seemingly drenched, standing right beside her bedroom window, staring at her. Lana freaked out, but then as quickly as he appeared, he was gone. This became routine for poor Lana, and demons started haunting her every night. One night she heard a knock at her door, and assuming it was her parents, she went to answer it, only to have her mouth covered by an invisible hand. She tried to scream, but the hand wouldn't let her. Suddenly her dog appeared and distracted the entity, allowing Lana to scream for help, but this only angered the spirit. To get back at her, it picked up the dog and threw it out the window, sending it plunging to its demise. Years later, they learned that someone was killed in the house, which could explain the tortures, but still, not a single member of the family has ever dared return.